Daisy didn't respond. Her eyes glistened, her hands still. She didn't move, but in that stillness, something shifted again, irreversibly. From that night forward, he stopped pretending to love a woman who only loved power, pretending to be content with a life built on performance. But while the mansion remained beautiful on the outside, cracks were now visible to anyone who dared to look inside. Ifunanya, sensing the change but refusing to believe it, began lashing out, first at Adeze, then at the children, and eventually at Emeka himself. The insults turned crueler, louder, more public. She accused him of betrayal, of madness, of being blinded by poverty and pity. But Emeka had already seen through the fog. And what he saw was a woman who wore diamonds to cover up emptiness, and another who wore humility like armor, and somehow carried his whole family with nothing but bare hands and a quiet heart. He hadn't touched Adeza yet, not once, but emotionally he had already gone. If Nanya's late night became the unspoken norm, the glittering parties, exclusive galas, the endless charity events were no longer occasional indulgences. They were her escape, her fortress against the life unveiling at home. Emeka would come home or to an empty bed, the cold sheet a stark contrast to the heat of his longing. He tried quietly, patiently to reach her. Come to bed, he would whisper, hoping for a trace of a woman who once loved him. But she would only murmur back, I'm tired, before disappearing beneath the heavy velvet curtain of their bedroom, leaving him to wrestle with a loneliness that no amount of wealth can soothe. For years, he fought the urge to look elsewhere, to break the vows he had made, not just to Ifunanya, but to himself. His pride held him back. The legacy of his family, the public image, everything demanded loyalty, even if it was unreciprocated. His friends, men who had long mastered the art of distraction, urged him otherwise. Emeka, you can't live like this, one had said over whiskey. The city lights sprawling beneath them. You deserve more than cold shoulders and empty nights. Another chimed in. Everyone chats cheating. It's how we survive in this world. Don't let pride kill your happiness. But Emeka wanted something different, something real. Then they visited the marriage counseling, and her reaction was absurd. Marriage counseling is for the weak people, she once said, eye flashing with disdain. I have better things to do than sit down and discuss feelings with a stranger. Even when Emeka tried to talk to her directly to bridge the silence with honesty, she deflected, blamed him, and simply walked away. The nights grew colder, the house more divided. Emeka fought his battles in silence, watched the woman he once adored drift further into a world where he had no place. And in the shadows of that distance, Adeze remained steady, unseen, quiet presence who offered the one thing Ifunanya never did, understanding. But Emeka kept his desire locked away, honoring a promise no one else seemed to remember, at least for now. Because despite the loneliness, despite the pains, the whispering voices of temptation, he was still fighting. He was fighting the loneliness. And this loneliness didn't just haunt Emeka, it consumed him. What began as quiet frustration soon spiraled into restless nights filled with whiskey bottles and cigarette smoke. The man who once commanded boardrooms and controlled empires now found himself drowning in empty glasses and heavy silence. He drank to forget the cold bed, the cutting words, the emptiness that echoed louder than any storm. The night stretched endlessly. When the city finally slept, Emeka wandered through his mansion like a ghost, haunted, restless, and broken. Adeza watched this unraveling from the margins. She saw the deep lines curving his face, the bloodshot eyes, the unsteady hands, the nights he missed meals, the days he barely spoke. His heart aches, but her footsteps never faltered. She became his nurse in those days, dark hours. She became his nurse in those long, dark hours. The one who fetched water, cleaned the spill of whiskey from his trembling fingers, whispered soft encouragement her barely heard. Sir, please drink water. Your body needs it more. She didn't judge. She didn't retreat. She just stayed. If Naya meanwhile felt no responsibility, as the madame of the house, she believed her role was above the mess that Emeka created with his own hands. His drinking, his spiraling, those were his problems. Problems she refused to inherit. If Naya's presence in the house became more distant, more like a shadow drifting through the rooms she no longer cared for, she looked at Adize with tiny veiled contempt, convinced the maid's only value was in keeping the children and the household running, not in meddling with her husband's private bottles. But Adiza wasn't just a maid. She was the steady hand, the quiet balm, and the unexpected refuge. One night, Emeka collapsed into the living room floor, the weight of the bottle finally catching up with him. Adiza was there immediately, supporting him, speaking softly, wiping the sweat from his brows. Her touch was gentle, familiar, yet electric. That night, as he lay vulnerable and broken, something shifted. For the first time in years, Emeka didn't push her away. She held him, not just his body, but the pieces of a man desperately trying to find himself again. It was in this moment, in the quiet of their shared struggle, that feeling started to bloom, slowly, dangerously, without permission. Adele saw past the billionaire's facade to the man's longing for peace. Emeka saw past the maid's uniform to the woman who never gave up on him. Neither spoke of it yet, neither acted on it, but the foundation had cracked, and nothing would ever be the same again. Days bled into nights and nights blurred into a haze of half-remembered conversation and whispered confessions. Emeka drinking worsened. What began as an escape became a chain he couldn't break. His empire remained unshaken on the outside, but inside the walls of his life were crumbling. Adeza was the constant amid the chaos she carried him through the wars of it. Sometimes physically supporting him to bed, sometimes simply sitting silently beside him while the world spun out of control. She never judged, she never demanded, she only cared. But even as she nursed him back from the edge, Adezes only had to wrestle with the forbidden affection that was growing like wildfire between them. She knew the rules. They were clear and unbreakable. The employer and the maid, the billionaire and the servant, the husband and the wife. But emotions don't follow rules. Each stolen glance, every lingering touch, while handling him a glass of water, the soft words she whispered to calm his trembling hands, these moments chipped away at the boundaries. And Emeka, in his vulnerable state, was no longer the man who would look away. He found solace in Adesa's presence in a way he hadn't in years. The way she listened without judgment, the way her eyes didn't look past him but saw him, broken, tired, human, made something inside him stir. Meanwhile, Ifunanya, wrapped in her world of glamour and influence, remained indifferent. She barely noticed the way her husband's gaze shifted, nor the growing distance between them that wasn't caused by her, but her absence. When she did see, it was only to scoff. Let him drown in his own sorrow, she whispered to a friend once. He's the one who lost control, not me. If Naya's cold days became the final push that forced Emeka further into Adese's orbits, one evening, after a particularly brutal fight with his wife, where words were hurled like knives and silence screamed louder than the shouting, Emeka stumbled into the kitchen, his breath heavy with whiskey and defeat. Adeze was there, wiping down the counter. Without thinking, Emeka reached out. Her hand met his, tentative at first, their eyes locked. And in that moment, years of loneliness, neglect, and unspoken understanding poured through the fragile barrier between them. I don't want to be alone anymore, Emeka whispered. Adeze swallowed hard, her heart pounding. You are not. That night, for the first time, they allowed themselves to be more than employer and maid. They allowed themselves to be two souls seeking refuge in a storm that neither had planned, but both desperately needed. But the world outside their fragile sanctuary was waiting, and with it, the consequences of choices made in the shadows. Adaize's inner struggles. Adaize carried her own silent storm beneath the calm exterior. She was no stranger to hardship, raised in a small village where dreams were fragile and opportunities scarcer. But this was different. Here in a grand hall of Emeka's mansion, surrounded by wealth and power, she was just the maid invisible to most, underestimated by many. Yet every day she showed up, not just out of duty, but because she saw something in the Mecca that others didn't see. A man unraveling beneath the weight of his own expectations, a man desperate for a lifeline. But with every act of care, every gentle touch, Adesa's heart grew heavier. The affection blossoming between them was a dangerous secret, a forbidden fruit that could ruin them both. She wrestled with guilt. Was she betraying the sanctity of marriage? Was she crossing the line that should never be crossed? At night, when the house was silent and the world felt far away, Adeze would sit by the window, staring out at the sprawling city lights and wondering if she was fooling herself, if she were merely a shadow in Emeka's life, a temporary refuge until the storm passed. And yet, when he looked at her, really looked, she felt seen, not as a maid, not as someone to serve, but as a person with her own dreams, her own scars. One evening, after nursing Emeka through another long, painful night, she found herself confessing quietly, almost to herself, I didn't come here to fall in love with a broken man. But love, she realized, wasn't always fair. It didn't ask permission or wait for the perfect moments. It's simple. And with every moment she stayed with him by his side, Adiza was making a choice that would forever alter the course of their lives. Because in a world built on power and privilege and appearance, love was the greatest rebellion of all. Adiza's heart was the battlefield. Each day, she balanced the weight of her feeling against the walls society has built around them, walls made of class, reputation, and unspoken rules. She knew the risk, she knew the consequences, but she couldn't turn away. Emeka, fragile and worn, began to lean on her, not just for comfort, but for strength. In her presence, she found a reprieve from the biting loneliness and cold neglect of his marriage. She saw the man behind the empire, the man who once dreamed big, but had forgotten how to hope. Late one night, as the rain whispered against the windows and the house slept, Emeka reached for Adese's hand without hesitation. His grip was firm yet tender, a silent plea for connection. Why do you stay? He asked quietly, his voice raw with vulnerability. Adeze looked into his eyes and saw not just the billionaire or the husband, but a man aching to be understood. Because someone has to, she replied simply. And because sometimes the heart knows what the mind cannot yet accept. That night again marked a turning point. They began to share stolen moments, small gestures, lingering touches, whispered conversation in the dark, each one deepening the bond that neither could ignore. But outside those walks, the world waited. If Naya's suspicion was growing, sharp and bitter, the staff whispered behind closed doors, and the mansion once impenetrable facade began to crack. Emeka stood at a crossroads, torn between duty and desire, between a past that no longer held him and a future that promised both risk and redemption. And Adeze, quiet, strong, and fiercely loyal, was the unexpected compass guiding him through the storm. But storm doesn't last forever, and soon everything would come crashing down. The night was thick, and that was a drunken night, with rain and kind of silence that feels heavy in the chest. Emeka stumbled through the grand entrance of his mansion, his steps uneven, breath smelling of whiskey and regrets. The weight of the day and the bottles pressed down on him like shrewd. In his drunken haste, he barely noticed Adeze quietly entering the room, carrying a tray of glass of water and some aspirin. Sir, she whispered gently, stepping closer. His eyes glazed and unfocused, locked onto her face for a fleeting moment. Something inside him stirred, a memory of warmth of home. Without thinking, without realizing, Emeka reached out and pulled Adeze towards him. His lip found hers, a clumsy, desperate kiss filled with longing and confusion. Adeze froze, heart pounding firstly. The shock of it hit her like a thunder sharp. When he finally blinked and pulled back, his eyes cleared just enough to register the truth. Emeka started, his voice thick with embarrassment and something else, regret, maybe not shame. Adeze stepped back, a flush creeping up her chest. Sir, it's me, she said softly. He looked at her, the confusion deepening. I thought it was Ifunaya. She swallowed hard, searching his eyes for what they really meant. Maybe you didn't want it to be, Adisa said quietly, the weight of the moment settling between them. Emeka closed his eyes, the room spinning. The kiss wasn't just a mistake. It was a crack in the armor they both wore, a confession neither dared to voice in the daylight. From that night on, nothing could be the same. The lines between duty and desire blurred. The quiet sanctuary they'd built together teetered on the edge of the precipice. For Emeka, the kiss was a painful awakening. For Adeze, it was the beginning of a truth she couldn't deny. And somewhere beneath the surface of their fractured lives, a new chapter was quietly beginning. One forged in vulnerability, longing, and the undeniable pull of forbidden love. The mornings after that night lingered like a fragile secret between them, unspoken, heavy, and charged with a thousand questions, neither dared to answer, neither dared to ask aloud. Emeka avoided Adesa's eyes, shame twisting his words whenever they meet. She, on the other hand, carried a strange mixture of hope and fear, knowing that the world had collided in a way that could not be undone. The mansion, once a place of cold formalities and silent resentment, now held an electric tension. Each glance, each accidental touch felt like the echo of that drunken kiss, reminding them both that beneath the real the place something real was taking root. Yet, outside their fragile bubbles, the relentless pulse of life went on. If Naya's absence grew more pronounced, her suspicions sharper, the household whispered loyalties were tested, but Emeka and Adeze found themselves trapped between two impossible choices: cling to the safety of what was expected or risk everything for what their hearts now demanded. And as the day stretched on, the quiet truth between them whispered louder. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin not in the lights but in the shadows. Adeze often found herself standing by the window, her eyes scanning the driveway long before the familiar silhouette of Emeka's car appeared. Every late afternoon, her heart quickened with a mixture of hope and longing, aching for the moment he would walk through the door, worn, tired, yet still undeniably his. She longed not just for his presence but to care for him, to ease his burdens in the quiet way no one else could, to offer him something more than a servant's duty, to attend to his needs, both physical and emotional, in a way that no one had done for years. The stolen glances in the dim light of the mansion spoke volumes. Hours would pass with nothing said, yet they communicated more in those silent moments, eyes locked, breathing slowed, words shrieking, until it was just the two of them caught in a space where nothing else existed. Then one night, under the muted glow of the hallway light, Emeka pulled Adeze close again. This time the kiss was softer, slower, full of unspoken apologies, desperate yearning, and a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find something real amidst the chaos. Meanwhile, if Naya had been away on a business trip for nearly a month, she had sent the children to her mother's house, citing the need for uninterrupted focus on her career. Calls to Emeka were scarce and brief, a mere formality rather than connection. The house felt emptier than ever. But Adeza and Emeka, caught between duty and desires, were beginning to realize that sometimes absence leaves a space that no one else could fill but the heart itself. Emeka fought hard every day, every moment to keep his promise to himself, to honor the marriage vows he had taken. The temptation whispered relentlessly, but he built walls around his heart, pushing away every stolen glance, every tender touch from Adeze. He told himself it was just loneliness, just a momentary weakness that would pass. But sometimes, no matter how strong the fights, the walls crumble. Until one night when all the resistance finally gave way. It wasn't planned, it wasn't premeditated, it just happened. In the quiet darkness of the mansion with the weight of years pressing down on him, Emeka finally let himself fall. And in that surrender, everything changed. That night with Adeze was unlike anything Emeka had ever allowed himself to experience. The barriers he'd built around his heart, his desires, his very soul, shattered beneath the weight of their shared longing. Adeze, who had quite loved him from the shadows, was suddenly the center of his world. Their breaths mingled in the dark, their bodies entwined in the fragile first connection that felt both forbidding and inevitable. Emeka's hand trembled as he traced the lines of her face, committing every detail to memory. The softness of her skin, the way her eyes searched his for something more than just a moment's escape. For Adeze, it was a fulfillment of a dream she barely dare whisper, a hope that has sustained her through years of silence and service. Now, in this room where everything was stripped bare, she was seen, not as a maid, but as a woman. When dawn crept through the curtains, it brought with it the weight of reality. Emeka lay beside her, torn between the man he had expected to be and the man he longed to become.